Check, check, check. One. Check, check.
Good morning and welcome to the United National Congress UNC Emergency National Briefing. Good Sunday morning to all of you on behalf of the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, Kamla Persad-Bissessar. Trinidad and Tobago is in a crisis. Our people are dying. 2,560 citizens have lost their lives to this COVID pandemic. The United National Congress has been saying and continues to say, along with its leader, that the People's National Movement under the leadership of Keith Christopher Rowley, with his selection of a Minister of Health who was never qualified even pre-pandemic, still is not qualified, and is leading a government that is carrying our nation into a very dark place, where the only businesses that are blooming and booming are those that deal in death, the mortuaries, the funeral homes. Trinidad and Tobago, we are suffering. And on top of that, the policies of lack of science, lack of understanding, arrogance, lack of communication, lack of education took a turn for the worse yesterday, with Keith Christopher Rowley, a Prime Minister who has no moral authority whatsoever to berate, to denigrate, to attack the citizens, coming down to state that he is going to force mandatory vaccinations. Kamla Persad-Bissessar immediately reiterated her position and the position of the United National Congress: no to forced vaccination, no to forced mandatory vaccination. The position of the UNC has always been that the vaccination program, as woeful as it was under the PNM, is one of the tools necessary to keep our people safe. But we are the worst in the world. Our citizens are dying at an alarming rate. Other countries are warning their citizens to stay away from Trinidad and Tobago. And this falls and is bolted to the chest of Keith Christopher Rowley and the PNM. We have a special emergency briefing here today because of the critical nature. We have been saying it for a long time, but we need the population to understand that things could have been different, that things can be different. Things need to change, and if the PNM and Rowley do not want to change it, then the people must change them. So this morning we have an expert, one of the members of a medical team of the United National Congress under the heading and leadership of the Honorable Kamla Persad-Bissessar, a man who spent over 40 years as one of the leading specialists in Trinidad and Tobago and globally. A doctor, a real doctor who understands the nuances of fighting a pandemic. I introduce to you former Minister of Education and specialist in gynecology, Dr. Tim Gopi Singh. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning, Anil, and good morning to the viewers and listeners who are focused on us this morning. It's a privilege and an honor to be on this program and to discuss with you some of the issues related to this COVID-19 pandemic. And the management from Prime Minister Rowley and his government has been woeful. And I would consider it in totality as smacks of criminal negligence from the top down to all who are involved in the administration and the management of this COVID-19 pandemic. The citizens of Trinidad and Tobago have lost confidence in the Prime Minister and his team. And for 2 years, they have continued to fool the population on their daily briefings and saying absolutely nothing. One telling you about a color of a chart, the next one telling you about how many beds are filled, the next one following just dictating the WHO directions, and the next one absolutely doing nothing. So the Minister of Health and his advisory team has been woeful in the management of this COVID-19 pandemic. And it goes way back from the beginning in January 2020, when the opposition and the opposition leader and us brought a motion of urgent public importance to be debated on January 30th, the same day that the President described Trinidad and Tobago as a country where we now have the COVID-19 as a health emergency. And not only once we attempted to discuss this and bring it together so that we could have a bipartisan approach to the management of this, but they refused on 3 times in the lower house and twice in the upper house. 5 times the speaker, 3 times the speaker of the house and twice the president of the Senate refused the discussion on this COVID-19 pandemic. If this discussion had taken place early, we would not have been in the position that we are in now, to be a country with the highest death rate per million citizens population. We are the worst in the world. And also the infection rate, we are the worst in the world, the highest infection rate.
Tim Gopi Singh, pause right there. Pause right there. Because Keith Christopher Rowley went into Parliament recently and said, based on the CFR rate from the inception of the COVID-19 pandemic, Trinidad and Tobago, when you divide up everything, our rate is 2.98, and we are the lowest because they included the initial stages when there was no testing, no data, no line. And he tried to say, well, we're not the absolute worst in the world. We are actually 44th worst, which means that there are 163 countries better than us. Please explain. You have said, and I've seen the statistics, that over the last 5 weeks, we are #1 in the world worst. We are the country where it is most likely that someone will die of COVID-19. Please explain the nuances with the statistics, because for Rowley to play games with statistics when we're talking about lives is criminally negligent. Please explain for the people.
Well, case fatality ratio, it's a computation of the amount of deaths per the amount of citizens who have been shown to be COVID positive. Trinidad stands at about 3%. In other words, if 100 persons are COVID positive, we have 3 deaths out of the 100. That is one aspect of it. But when you look at the amount of deaths per million population, we are undoubtedly the worst in the world. And why is this so? Because the government has failed to do what is needed to be done. And if I may be privileged to take you back to early from January 2020, when we raised the matter, they only took, in March they began to act. 3 months it took the Prime Minister to begin to act. They allowed 22,000 citizens to come into Trinidad and Tobago when the world was showing that a significant amount of countries were already infected with the COVID-19. And why did we do that? Then they were ill-prepared. They were ill-prepared, and then Rowley said that they were prepared, but they did not have personal protective equipment, they did not have ventilators, they did not have testing kits. So they deliberately under-tested the population because election was coming in soon. And they did that to show the population, they fooled and deceived the population that the infection rate was very low in Trinidad. So here it is, the citizens were fooled, they lied to the population, told the population that we are managing this thing very well. They won the election on that, and now you could see the real evidence of total mismanagement, gross incompetence, and criminal negligence. Now, beside being underprepared and the frontline workers did not have the personal protective equipment, the question about the vaccines, when the Prime Minister should have been moving to get the vaccines from across the world, from India and other countries which were giving the vaccines. The other Caribbean countries got vaccines before Trinidad. And when he was approached on that, he said he is not going to be begging. That was begging. And then another private sector company, one of the largest conglomerates we have in the Caribbean, was prepared to give 340,000 vaccines to Trinidad very early on. He refused that as well, and he made no significant gains in terms of the acquisition of vaccines. When the rest of the world were 2 months in vaccination programs, we lost a lot of lives of senior citizens during that time. And when the vaccines came into Trinidad, the government had no ability to determine how they're going to administer the vaccines, where they're going to administer, who are they going to administer the vaccines to. And this has been a fundamental issue in the incompetence of the government. They wait until the vaccines came into the country before they began to think where they're going to vaccinate and how they vaccinated. And then you will remember the amount of deaths that took place before April was about 240, I believe. And subsequent to April, when they invited citizens to come for vaccines, in the senior citizens lining up in the rain for vaccines, there were no vaccines available. And significant amount of people died as a result of that. Then you must also remember he invited people to go to Tobago. 50,000 people went to and from Tobago. Tobago, which had about 2 deaths prior to that, now I think there are about 76 deaths in Tobago, all as a result of the Prime Minister Rowley's incompetence and mismanagement of this entire pandemic. And then the vaccine program, he signed a deal with the Chinese government for $200 million to borrow $200 million US, but signed to get the Sinopharm vaccine. And then he began to beg the population to accept the Sinopharm vaccine. And it was the United National Congress which supported the government at that time in asking the citizens to take the Sinopharm vaccine, because if that was the only one available at the time, they should have taken it. And we still maintain that all citizens should avail themselves of whatever vaccine is available. So the whole vaccine fiasco, and even today.
But let's be clear right there. What you are saying is an educate to vaccinate. You are saying that the PNM did not procure vaccinations in a timely fashion. They also simultaneously did not educate, do a communication strategy, get out there and answer any questions, treat the citizens with respect. They did not teach, they did not educate, they did not discuss the science and how the efficacy works and what's the safety measures and the numbers of testing and what's the difference between emergency approval and full approval. They also told, and every time they spoke, we could see that lies were being told, and the trust in the population, the population has no trust in Rowley, no trust in Terence Dialsing, no trust in the young junior doctors that are coming there every day to change their messaging. But the United National Congress has always said, we will educate to vaccinate. But there is a difference that happened yesterday, that Rowley is saying that he is coming to force mandatory vaccinations on people and determine whether they could put food on their table to feed their families or take an injection. What is the position, and what do you say about that, Dr. Tim Gopi Singh?
Well, this is totalitarian in nature. It's authoritarianism and dictatorship. It's dictatorial, and it speaks volumes of how the government has been run under Keith Christopher Rowley, with a certain degree of arrogance, intemperance, and this is his modus operandi for the last 6 years. I think by now the citizens have become disgusted with the Prime Minister and his team, because they're displaying total incompetence across the board. And this type of approach, as the opposition leader and the political leader has already stated, we are against mandatory vaccination. This is against the human right of a citizen, which is under sections 4 and 5 of the Constitution. So this totalitarianism, the dictatorial attitude of the government, will not be accepted. What, Anil, you just mentioned, is that the population lost confidence in the government. And so they became worried, they became apprehensive, they became frightened. So their fears and apprehensions were never answered by the government. They continue to try to push it down onto the population. As you said, they did not educate the population. And PAHO made some recommendations as how this should have been managed. That was not even considered nor followed. To go out in the communities, use the churches, use the mandirs, the temples, the business places, go out to the community and try to win their confidence so that they could have take the vaccine.
Dr. Tim, you mentioned their fear, and you're correct, and it's fear, mistrust. But also the fear is getting worse right now, Tim Gopi Singh. You mentioned it before, but I need you to go there. I am confused. I've been trying to follow this. I cannot understand my citizens going to an ICU. The United National Congress built the Children's Hospital, Point Fortin Hospital, Arima Hospital, Kamala Prasad Bisasabedi San Fernando Teaching Hospital, great equipment. We have great doctors. Yet I read every day my citizens go in to the ICU, and I'm hoping to see 8 days, 10 days, 12 days, recovery, coming out, survival. And all I'm seeing is death and devastation. People messaging, they can't get in contact with their loved ones. 33 citizens died yesterday. We are the #1 worst in the world. The highest death rate on the 7-day rolling average. And Keith Christopher Rowley and his government are still talking arrogantly and shouting down to the people and victim blaming. Tim Gopi Singh, you're a doctor 40 years. You've had over 35,000 patients. And knock on wood, you've not lost one yet. How and why are we losing people so quickly in our health system, in the parallel health system, in the PNM system? Please explain. The people want to know.
There are several issues related to that question and statement that you made, Anil. The very important issues is that the Ministry of Health and the regional health authorities were never prepared to be able to deal with this situation. And thank God that the United National Congress and former Prime Minister Mrs. Kamala Persad-Bissessar was able to construct the Couva Hospital, start the Arima Hospital, start the Point Forte Hospital, and plans were on the way to begin the construction of the General Hospital Port of Spain. Well, thank God that the Arima and the Arima and Point Forte hospitals were constructed, and so that there were beds that were available for use. Now also the South Center as well, where patients are being rehabilitated from the virus. Could you imagine what would have happened if these hospitals, Arima, Couva, Point Forte Hospital, were not available? And we also had done a tremendous amount of work at Cora Hospital under Minister Khan at that time. So the issue is, how many doctors are there in the system? There were over 400 doctors waiting for employment, and Diyal Singh was telling the doctors, write to him, and he made the excuse that they didn't want to go into the communities, which was a total lie. The same doctors now he has had to rely on, who are junior doctors, just finished the internship, asking them to go and do the job of senior, experienced professional doctors, which they have fired 18 of them around the place from Couva Hospital and sent them to Arima Hospital and fired them from Arima Hospital. When the 6 made some noise about Davlin Thomas, he threatened them and he moved them out. So these 6 senior doctors, by March, they were managing the system very well. The death rate was low. There were patients coming out of the ICU alive. But subsequent to March, when these doctors were moved out and the 12 doctors complained, senior doctors, intensivists, anesthetists, nephrologists, cardiologists, the best that you can find to help you manage patients, they were moved out of the system, cast aside, and the poor young doctors now, without any experience, having to deal with this. And one young doctor was brave enough to come out and say, one doctor has been seeing 60 patients in an emergency tent. Imagine we are a developed country and you have tents to look after patients. When you have hospitals and you had to construct tents, the United States Army had to give you some tents down at Hazley Crawford as well. What have you been doing in preparation? You have over 150 beds at Couva Hospital. Use the beds there. Make sure that you utilize. Now patients have to go into the emergency tents. They have to go to the accident in emergency. When they crash, when the heart rate stops and they're almost dead, to resuscitate them, you have to resuscitate them on the floor of accident and emergency. So you pushed aside the senior doctors. You brought the junior doctors into forefront. One doctor to 60 patients in the emergency tent.
Wait, Tim Gopi Singh, slow down there, because the people, I know you understand. We have to break it down for the people. What is ideally in an ICU environment, what type of specialist is needed, and what is the ratio that you should have to get the highest impact and patient care and highest survival rate possible? What should be and what do we have in Trinidad and Tobago under the PNM, please?
Ideally, an intensive care unit should have anesthetists, intensivists, and a teamwork of senior professionals, including the nephrologists and the cardiologists and pneumologists and so on. Now, one doctor to about 4 patients in the intensive care unit, so that they could manage those 4 patients, and one nurse to 2 patients. In one hospital, we have 15 or 16 ICU beds, I think, at Hoover. So there should be about 8 nurses, and there should be about 4 senior consultant experienced doctors. We do not have one senior experienced consultant doctor. They have moved them from house officer, give them registrar's position, give them acting consultant's position, but that's not experience. You can't just say that you're promoting. So this is why we have possibly 100% mortality. As 10 people go in, 10 people come out dead and end up in the boxes in the mortuary. Whereas internationally, what has been happening, if 10 patients go in, you will have 6 to 7 patients coming out alive. So where are we? And they refuse to answer the question when asked what is the mortality rate in the ICU. In the HDU, which is a step down from the ICU, when the patient begins to feel a little better, they go into the HDU, which is the high dependency unit, or if they're not critically ill or severely ill, they are in the HDU, and then God forbids if they become more critically ill, they are transferred into the ICU. But you have junior doctors having to intubate patients, having to monitor the oxygen saturation, the mean arterial pressure, and these are technical things that the consultant doctors would have been monitoring. But these junior doctors are inexperienced. This junior doctor who spoke recently to Camille Hunt on the Express and said that when patients crash, and in the accident and emergency, they fall on the floor, you have to resuscitate them on the floor. How demeaning. One life lost is too much. And this is what Prime Minister Rowley and Minister Diyal Singh and his team of questionable advisors, this is what they are doing to this country.
Tim Gopi Singh, what you have just said there has sent a fear through my heart. So you are telling me that if I run in a restaurant, I have the best chef, the best prepper, sous chef and so on, to make sure that the food is of a high quality and consistent all the time, and they can adapt and they know what materials they need, what ingredients, and if they don't have this, they are there and they have the experience to make decisions, and that's how they move. If you're a coach, you understand what's going on. If your athlete gets injured or they get a high temperature, you have to adapt and move. You need to give them recovery time, and this is intuition that is gained from experience. Are you telling me, if I'm understanding you correctly, Doc, that in the fight of our life, in a war against a pandemic, that we do not have the best of the best with the experience, the intuition, the knowledge to adapt to situations, to monitor machines, to monitor oxygen saturation, and utilize on an individual level different methodologies to save lives? You are telling me that people are just going in there. They are not monitored properly because there's one doctor to 60 patients, and that doctor is not even a specialist. So why are we going there? Now we understand that is why our people are just going there and die. This is not funny. This is very, very critical. This is criminal negligence of the highest order. Please explain what that means when you're monitoring and treating, and what medication and how experience in your case allows you to save someone, whereas someone else who's not as experienced or not as qualified may not be able to understand that sort of treatment.
Well, the anesthetists and the intensivists are the ones who really manage the intensive care unit patients. And if they don't have the competence, the junior doctors do not have the competence to know, well, how far the endotracheal tube is going into the bronchus, how far down the bronchus, what oxygen saturation, what oxygen level you give to the patient, how many liters per minute, what is the amount of carbon dioxide that is coming back out of the thing, how do you suction the airways, do you do chest x-rays, do you do CT scans to see how much of the lung has been involved? And we all know that there is a kinetic storm that emerges after these patients get the COVID-19 infection, which is a hypersensitivity where they begin to have hypersecretion within the lung circulation. That blocks the lung circulation. So the main bronchus and the other smaller bronchi need to be suctioned out. Some people do an additional type of bronchoscopy and suction them out in more developed centers. So these are the things that ought to be done to help save the patients. But nothing like that is being done. So I have described it that Rowley has gone across this country and has declared war on this country instead of ensuring that the citizens of this country have been taken care of. He has declared war on the citizens by his mismanagement and his incompetence. And he has created killing fields in the ICU and the emergency department and the ambulances and are at home. People are dying all over. At home, they wouldn't even give them a monitor to monitor the oxygen level. They would not even give them some basic drugs to help to develop the immunity. 12,000 citizens are at their homes, infecting their families. Some are dying at their homes. By the time they call the ambulance, there are 40-something ambulances for this entire country. Where are the ambulances from the 4 regional health authorities in Trinidad? Why couldn't they be brought on stream to assist? And the level of care in the ambulances, you need to upgrade the skills of the emergency technicians as well. All this need to be done. And when they go into the emergency tents, they stay there 6 days waiting for the results of the COVID test that has been done. By that time, they're deteriorating and they die in the emergency tents.
Tim Gopi Singh, you are saying at this time, still, and I know you're telling the truth because I have been on radio and people are calling me all over, that people are still waiting 5, 6, 7, 8 days for the test. Furthermore, I heard you say when the Brazilian variant started to ravage us around May 11th and it became the #1 variant that was causing hospitalization and death, I remember you saying at that time that there were 7,000 people at home, and you called on the government to get oxygen and different types of machinery that could be given to these people at home. You are now here in December when the Delta variant has taken over, where we are dying at record rates, where we are #1 in the world in the 7-day rolling average at 18.02, and in second place is Slovenia. You are still telling me that the government has not gotten this equipment for our citizens, even if they have to stay at home. We are reading a report 2 days ago that Terence Dialsing said, we are going to get more oxygen, and we are going 22 months into the war on our lives that we are losing 2,560 citizens and counting, because as we speak here at 11 a.m., unfortunately, at the rate we are going, over 13 people would have died today already from COVID-19. Tim Gopi Singh, when Kamla Prasad Bisesa, about 6 months ago, called for the removal, which was not an attack. You either performing or you're not performing. In professional sports, we know you either coach and win or you get out. This is life and death. This is highly more critical. This is more important. And Kamla Prasad Bisesa called on the government to remove the junior team, to stop playing games, to stop lying to the population when 200 citizens were dead. Now, 2,360 deaths later, they still have the same team in place. Why and what do you consider this lack of decisive movement and decision making on the part of Rowley, his cabinet and his government? How do you describe that? And how many lives could have been saved if Rowley had the testicular fortitude to listen to Kamla Prasad Bisesa and make changes and put specialists in charge?
I describe it as if he had the intestinal fortitude together with the testicular fortitude. And I may say something out of the box. I was privy to being sent information or messages to Prime Minister Rowley through WhatsApp. And he was having a press conference at 2 p.m. one Saturday. And I believe at around 10:30, 11, I sent a note in the WhatsApp asked him to discuss the whole matter of dealing with the thousands of patients at home, what he's going to do about them. He refused to answer it, and then he decided, he said in the press conference, he has blocked his friend. I still remain his friend, 50 years, but I'm saddened about his performance as far as this, well, his 6 years of non-performance as a prime minister and as a government. So I separate friendship from the whole question of administration and governance. And his governance has been abysmal and has been a total failure. Now, what is the cost of a pulse oximeter? $40 TT. What is the cost of an oxygen concentrator? You can get a fantastic oxygen concentrator at about $4,000 to $5,000 TT. Why couldn't we have bought 1,000 of these, which would be $5 million? Why couldn't we have bought a few thousands of the pulse oximeters so that patients at home could be monitoring their oxygen saturation and they could get oxygen from this oxygen concentrator plugged into a wall? It gives you 90% oxygen at a high flow rate. You know how many lives we could have saved? Then the other issue is drugs and pharmaceuticals. The ICU and the HDUs do not have a drug called methylprednisolone, which is a steroidal anti-inflammatory drug which helps to prevent the kinetic storm taking place and filling up the lungs with secretions and so on. They have failed to purchase any of the monoclonal antibody tocilizumab, which is about $6,000 or $7,000 a vial. One vial could save a life. They have failed to purchase the remdesivir, which is $700 per vial. You need 6 vials. As soon as the patient oxygen concentration starts to dip, you give them those injections, and you save their lives. The private nursing home that is doing it now are saving a number of lives as a result.
Go back there. You said something, methylprednisolone and the steroid. Now, being an asthmatic myself and having to be very careful because COVID-19 attacks the lungs, explain, because you just said that so quickly, I nearly fall off my chair. You just said in Trinidad and Tobago, the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, we have none of this critical steroid when we are in the war of a pandemic that attacks the lungs. Please say the name again. Explain what it does, and please let me know, because I heard about this. I got a message from a doctor 6 weeks ago saying that there's none in Trinidad and Tobago, and we are trying to fight. And I now understand why we are losing, why people are dying, because this kind of incompetence goes beyond description. Please describe what that does and why it is so critical, especially in this fight against COVID-19.
It's called methylprednisolone. It's a non-steroid, it's a steroidal anti-inflammatory drug which helps to reduce the effects of the kinetic storm when the patient has real multiplication of the virus in their system. And this can take place within 24 hours, 48 hours. It is given intravenously, it dampens down the inflammatory response, and it reduces the strength of the virus, and the patients do better. Substitute to that is dexamethasone. My understanding, the dexamethasone, which is almost a corollary to the methylprednisolone, that also is in scarce supply. And the anticoagulant like Clexane, also, which is given for 3 days, sometimes twice a day for 3 days, that is also in short supply. So where are we going? And then some of the broad spectrum antibiotics, when a patient has developed secondary bacterial infection, where they don't have them. I have received on numerous occasions requests from families, doctor, where can we get this methylprednisolone? I call the nursing homes to see if they have them. The nursing homes say we are keeping that for our patients in case there is an emergency with our patients. It's given to patients when they're in anaphylactic shock. So and so why has the government not decided to go directly to the pharmaceutical companies rather than going through the agents in Trinidad, which take a long time while patients are dying, while they're not getting the drugs that are needed to save their lives? Where is the drug called from Regeneron, which President Trump at that time, when he was admitted into hospital, got the drug from Regeneron, which is a plasma from patients who have already had the virus. They have developed antibodies. They have a system where they use the plasma, and they get the antibodies from it and put it into other patients to save their lives. So there's the Regeneron drug. There's remdesivir as an antiviral drug. There's the monoclonal antibody tocilizumab. And there are many more. So
Dr. Gopi Singh, are you saying to me and to the national population that all of these critical drugs are either in low supply or unavailable. Are you saying that?
Yes, they're in low supply, and in some instances, the nurses and the doctors from the ICU and the HDU sending to patients' relatives to ask them if they can get these drugs. I have about 3 or 4 on my
As you've just said, the
phone.
nation's relatives. And I'm now beginning to understand why we're failing so badly, so dramatically. I'm in shock because Trinidad and Tobago has some of the best doctors, the best specialists. We have some of the best equipment built by the United National Congress and purchased for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So for a team, a captain, Keith Christopher Rowley and his team to be utilizing equipment and space and capacity that was made for success and to be failing, there must be not only one reason, but many reasons, and I'm getting down to it and I'm hearing you, and I'm now beginning to understand how important it is to have proper management systems to identify those who know, to identify those who can save lives and put them in a position to work. You just talked about families. I've received 7 different messages and calls over the last 5 days. People asking me, a UNC senator, to get information on their loved ones from the PNM facilities because they are not getting 3, 4, 5, 7 days, not a word on their loved ones. Now, there's one thing to deal with the pandemic and so on, but there's also a psychological issue, and part of being a specialist medical doctor is dealing with the mental issues, the depression, the information, the fear, and keeping people informed. Why are we not even able, it seems simple, to inform families of what is taking place with their loved ones?
Well, I had a recent example of a patient of mine whose family was in the ICU. And one person called her after 2 days to indicate what the position with the family. And then they asked them, they provided a list of drugs that they asked them to try and get for the patient in the ICU. How can a government say, and a minister of health, who says that his responsibility stops at the door of the hospital, and echoed by the Prime Minister as well, when the Prime Minister said his responsibility stops there with the Minister of Health as well. But if the Minister of Health is failing, and the regional health authority boards have a major responsibility in this, they all should be fired, these 4 regional health authority boards in Trinidad. Every one of them, what have they done to encourage? They are the ones who chose Davlin Thomas, a carnival man, to be the CEO, and the man who has failed abysmally. He was a campaign manager for the guy on TV. He's Rowley's gopher. What does he know about management of personnel who are required? And because the doctors are in disagreement with his protocols that he is trying to put to them, he says, well, enough is enough, we'll fire you. And he fired a lot of them. So it's very sad that we continue with the same regional health authority boards, we continue with the same CEO, we continue to have the doctors not attending to patients, we continue to have junior doctors, we continue to have shortage of nurses when 1,400 nurses were looking for jobs. They're not giving them contracts. They're putting them month to month. Every 3 months, they're putting the doctors on the same thing, and they're threatening the doctors, if you raise your voice, we will fire you. So this is what is happening in this country. The Prime Minister should be ashamed of himself and his total mismanagement of this COVID-19 pandemic. And he should do the ultimate thing and resign, call an election, and let the people decide who they want to take care of their lives in this country. And this parallel health system which they have been talking about is a sham. It's a con job. It's a deception, because there is no parallel health system. They took certain wards from the existing hospital system and they put them focused for COVID. And while we dealing with the COVID, those patients who need treatment for their diabetes, hypertension, and for detection of early cancer and so on, and they had been neglected for years. They've not given inappropriate drugs for the management of the diabetes and the hypertension. And this is why most of them they deteriorated in their clinical situation. So when they became ill with the COVID, their situation is already very bad with the diabetes and hypertension, uncontrolled, getting worse, so they succumb. And this thing about those 4 doctors talking about people with comorbidity, and this one is a 65, a senior person with comorbidity. So because you have a comorbidity, you must die. Because you have diabetes and hypertension, or even you are immunosuppressed, you must die. Do the right thing for the citizen and save the person's life. This is not a death knell to be a diabetic and hypertensive and above 65. 70 is when you begin to live. And because somebody is 55 and so on, you begin to categorize them. Well, when they say elderly, what do they mean by elderly? Is it 55, 60, 65, 70? So that is the foolishness that is going on with these 4 doctors who are advising Rowley and Dayal-Singh. And Dayal-Singh doesn't have a clue. This is why I have to be strong in my putting him down, because if Rowley has a team of competent people, why doesn't he bring them out? The United National Congress under Mrs. Kamala Persad-Bissessar has been speaking for 2 years to have a bipartisan approach to the management of this. He has failed to take us on. He's very dismissive, he's very arrogant, he's intemperate, and he doesn't, but we have the brain power, we have the ability to gather and harness the resources of the senior doctors across the country who could be of tremendous help in the management. I empathize with the families of these 2,500 citizens, the United National Congress, and I'm sure the leader of the opposition and all of us and the entire country empathize with all those loved ones and the families who have passed. We all have friends and families who have died as a result, and not because they didn't take the vaccine, you know. It is because of the mismanagement in the hospital. So you saying citizen X has not taken the vaccine, so it's all right if he dies, he or she dies. Man, everybody should be treated with the respect and dignity. And when a patient dies and the family doesn't know that this patient has died only after 2 days, and then they find them in a mortuary and open a bag and just see their face. And then the other issue, part of the cultural community in Trinidad, the Hindu population, was deprived for 6 months from cremating their relatives under Hindu rights.
And continues.
And where's the judiciary? The judiciary, I must say it, if I say from my personal perspective, the judiciary stinks. Imagine an issue like that, which should be determined in 1 week, has been put 6 months later down and has not been resolved, when families upon families wanting to cremate their loved ones in an open pyre where there is no scientific evidence to show. By doing that in an open pyre creates any unnecessary risks to the families. Why has not the judiciary gone through 6 months? You put it down a list and it's for a judicial review at 6 months. Don't you understand, Chief Justice? Don't you understand the necessity for this? What have you done, Chief Justice? What did you do? Did you not hear the cries of the people?
Let me also join you in your condemnation, but I will condemn Keith Rowley, his PNM cabinet, for the racist policy, the divisive policy to attack the East Indian Hindu community that continues, because it was unnecessary to even reach the judiciary to have that delay, because the science is there to show that open pyre cremation has no added risk. They have had expert upon expert. The Sanatan Dharma Mahasabha has tried to communicate with the CMO, with Dayal-Singh, with the PNM, to no avail. They've treated an entire population, a segment of the population, with total disrespect, total disregard. People in the Hindu faith believe that their loved ones, in order to send them off properly, need to be separated, the body from the spirit, and this is best done with open pyre cremation. Why would a government insist on an oppressive, tyrannical policy without any scientific basis whatsoever. Anil Roberts, as a Catholic, and my children is Pentecostal, and a lover of all religions, I can say that that is a divisive policy created to attack one sector, and it must not be tolerated in Trinidad and Tobago by all. We must not say that I'm not a Hindu, so when they attack Hindu, I don't get angry, because they will come for Muslim, they will come for Shouta Baptist, they will come for Orisha, they will come for Jai Rastafari, they will come for Buddhists, they will come for Catholic, they will come for evangelicals, and they will come one by one. That's what happens in a dictatorship. The open fire cremation policy must be negated now. Allow the Hindu community so to do safely, as is occurring all over the world. It's a disgrace on Rowley, a disgrace on the PNM, and we must get rid of Rowley now, because when you divide a country as beautiful as ours like this, all we can say is shame on you. Rowley, you must go just like you went from Tobago. The people of Trinidad are waiting for you. Tim Gopi Singh, as we go on, because it's not done there yet, you talked about testing. Since this pandemic started in Wuhan back in November, December 2019, as we looked on as it spread and it moved into Europe and it went into Italy and Spain and it got into New York and Canada, all we heard from all the experts, testing, 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 contact tracing, testing, testing. We in Trinidad and Tobago are 22 months into the pandemic, and we are hearing a CMO saying an Omicron positive person was on a plane, but we ain't test nobody yet. We will test it when necessary. People are calling me on the radio and saying they are being told to come to Woodbrook, then to St. James, and sent down to Diego Martin, like they're going on a travel round to spread COVID-19 throughout the country because there is no testing. People are paying $1,200, $1,300, $1,500 for tests. Why at this stage in the fight of a pandemic don't we have free, fully available testing? Tim Gopi Singh.
You have touched on a very important point there, Anil. And over 200, I believe 220,000 tests have been done in the private labs. And they have been done with a cost of about $1,600, $1,400, $1,200. I believe one of the lowest is $900. So the private citizens have had to spend close to over $300 million to get their testing. And so this is why a number of citizens, even though they may have some mild symptoms before the things really start, they are really desirous of having their test done, but they're not getting their test done because they can't even put food on the table for their children. They can't even get the things for their children to follow the education program in schools, far less to go and spend $1,600 or $1,400 for a test. And by that, what happens? They have the virus, they haven't been tested, and they continue to spread it because they don't know whether they are positive. What has this government done? As I mentioned before, I spoke to a few colleagues in India, and they indicated to me that a COVID-19 test in India is costing approximately $50 TT. What has happened to Diyal Singh and Rowley and his government? Why are they impoverishing the people more and more? Why are they suffocating the people? And in fact, the people are dying at their hands. The deaths of these citizens are on the hands of Rowley and Diyal Singh and their team. And they have to be accountable. And as I said before, excuse me, once I'm alive, I will agitate that a commission of inquiry must be done into the Rowley's mismanagement and gross incompetence in this management of this COVID-19 pandemic. And people have to be held accountable. Davil Thomas have to be held accountable. The boards of the regional health authorities have to be held accountable. And the 4 junior inexperienced doctors in clinical management, they may be good public health, looking after insect vector control and mosquitoes and so on. And the next one probably could draw good graphs as an epidemiologist. But you need clinical competence and clinical ability to manage these patients and to prevent the deaths of these patients. And they have failed. Now, so a test, $50, why you have, and he has failed to even bring in the quick antigen testing, which you can get a result in 5 minutes. The nursing homes have them when patients go in for surgery. before the surgery in the morning, they go and do a quick antigen testing so the doctors and the nurses feel comfortable to operate on these patients. So that because it mightn't be 100% safe sensitivity, but it gives you a true picture of what is happening to the patient. Why are these tests not more widely available? So you're under-tested at the beginning, under-tested, and just to win the election, and now you're making all sorts of excuses that the Trinidad Public Health Laboratory. Now this issue of this Omicron thing, it's not the government that detected that, you know. It was in a private lab. The private lab is the lab that did the sequencing for this Omicron and found it. And they're the one who reported it to the ministry. So when the Alsinger, they say, well, they have the systems in place for monitoring. So they sent it to the professor at the university, and she confirmed that was the Omicron thing. And as you said, Anil, just a while ago, if this patient was positive on the aircraft, and she was allowed to come in with their mistake, and then you have advanced passenger information systems, you know every citizen that is coming into the country before they even arrive. So if a terrorist is coming, they know to apprehend that terrorist on flight as soon as the flight lands. So when the Alsing says he doesn't know, when when MP Monilal asked him in Parliament recently, do you know the name of the airline? 5 days later, this man shamelessly says that he doesn't know the name of the airline. It is left to the Aviation Authority and the Airports Authority to determine. What a mess. This man is a compulsive liar. He's a pathologic liar. And Rowley is an undeniable, incompetent prime minister. And these people have to go. They're suffering the people. People don't want them anymore. They showed it in Tobago. They don't want them in Trinidad. Call an election. Whoever win, but they don't want you all. So it's a sad state. As I said, it's killing fields in Trinidad.
Well, as you said, killing fields. Tim Gopi Singh, I need you to explain to me, because I've been trying for the last 20 months to understand. And the editorials in the newspaper and the media don't seem to want to ask. And Rowley has this way of victim blaming. We cannot go to the beach past noon because we will go and listen to music, and COVID-19 comes on music. So if you listen to some conscious lyrics or some chutney music on the beach, you will get COVID-19. Also, rivers are not open once again. And I am the one who can say it because I feel no race. I don't understand race because of my makeup, my genetic makeup. Why are rivers being closed when the East Indian population frequents rivers with their families to have safe gatherings while the beach is open? And the beach is not even open fully, as Keith Rowley, who nearly got COVID 4 times, had to go into quarantine 2 or 3 times and spread to over 35 people in the first instance in Tobago, while inviting people to come to the pristine bubble of Tobago and infect it with COVID-19. Tim Gopi Singh, I need you to explain something to me, because they keep victim blaming. They keep getting up and telling the citizens, it's your indiscipline. You are indisciplined. You are terrible. That's why we're dying. That's why COVID-19. That's why we're the worst, because the people are the worst. And I totally disagree. But I would like to know, if we were on state of emergency for 170 days, we were on lockdown, shutdown, and broke down in the last 20 months for at least 14 months. And the airport was shut down so tight that even citizens born here with a birth paper and a passport could not come in through PAHO, Ministry of Health, World Health Organization, quarantine testing protocols. We now learn that the travel pass is a farce, but the airport was closed. And we were locked down, separate. My limited knowledge of virology and science means that the virus to live needs to jump from person to person. If we were separating and on lockdown state of emergency, and there was no community spread, especially of the Brazilian variant, which began the death and devastation in May, where did the COVID-19 pass? If it didn't, it wasn't here. It didn't pass through the airport. How did it reach on our twin island republic, Tim Gopi Singh?
Well, I think the population knows that the porous borders across in the southern part of Trinidad facilitated and allowed a number of non-nationals to come in, many of whom they were landing by the 20s and 30s on a daily basis. Some were Chagaramas, some in the southern peninsula. How many came from Venezuela and so on? And then how many were able to slip through? Look at the carnival in February 2020. 22,000 citizens came in there. And even in this aircraft, what have they done for testing and quarantining the rest of the citizens who were on that aircraft? Because the aircraft is air conditioned, the virus spreads by droplets, it circulates in the air, and therefore any one of the passengers on that aircraft could have contracted the virus. So, and I understand that the chief medical officer is saying that they have not done the testing and quarantine the rest of the passengers on that aircraft. Why would they not quarantine? I'm almost certain possibly one or two passengers on that aircraft would have possibly contracted the virus as well.
I would like you to explain to me, because the chief medical officer said in this situation, Archie, that they were not going to test. Now, understand this. They said that Keith Rowley did not need to test before getting on a plane to go to COP26 to talk to an empty auditorium where the world told him that we know about you, we know about your poor environmental record, and we are not here to be mama guide by you, so talk to crickets. When he got there, he had been in close contact with a COVID-19 lady that he bounced down with his golf cart and did not get out to see about her. She had given him 2 Gatorade that he drank for 5 or 6 hours while he was playing his golf, because he's not very skillful. Now, they then told us that he needed to be in constant contact with the individual for 15 minutes. So therefore, he didn't need to go into quarantine, so he could get on a plane and go. That's why they don't trust them, because the science changes. Now, the chief medical officer in this question that you're saying says that we didn't test everybody on the plane. Now, they were on that flight for at least 10, 12 hours because of stops, and it went Panama and come back and so on, landing and so on. Because we only tested, or we need to test 2 rows to the left, 2 rows to the right, and 2 seats back. So if the man went to the bathroom and touched here and touched there, like all the signs that we knew, and people went to the bathroom and touched there and flushed and turned on the water, they didn't come into contact. What about the flight attendants who were delivering, moving up and down and passing? All of these people, they changed the science to suit their incompetence, Tim Gopi Singh, and it is confusing the population.
Yeah, that shows a general incompetence and inability to determine the scientific approach to the management of this. When you put someone who, I'm sorry to say on the national television, again, what has the University of the West Indies gone to when they are just giving away honorary doctorates? I mean, I dedicated 26 years of my life in the university setting from 1980s to 2007. To become a full professor, you must publish scientific papers, write textbooks, and you must be internationally known. Are you giving an honorary doctorate for somebody who was supervised? It is not a matter of questioning and being a judge of anything. But you 2,500 people have died under your hands, and you sit down there and I heard you mention, Anil, about this question of the honorary doctorate. That's another issue, but congratulations to him. If he deserves it, that's fine. But you mismanaging the entire thing, and you wouldn't call for help and assistance from senior medical personnel across the country. And this country abounds with the best talent, that some of them can hold the whole heads of departments in international hospitals. I was in the University of Toronto, I worked in 5 hospitals in Canada, and many of my colleagues there held senior positions. I said, I have one of my students, a postgraduate student, who is in charge of a whole cancer center in New York. Because our doctors are so well qualified, experienced over the years, and even some of the junior doctors who are now aspiring. And you mean to say that you're not getting the support and you're relying on WHO alone to give you all the advice?
Dr. Tim Gopi Singh, as we wrap up, and you just said, and let me just alert you, the honorary doctorate was given back because of his COVID-19 management in Trinidad and Tobago.
And I want to say that's been abysmal.
Well, exactly.
Abysmal.
So he did not deserve it. It wasn't given for anything else. It was
another
given
issue.
by the PNM specifically for his COVID-19 management domestically and regionally. Me know what he did regionally. So that's just the joke of the PNM. Tim Gopi Singh, victim blaming. You talk about specialists that you train heading international cancer centers and so on. Keith Rowley is blaming victims, blaming people for COVID-19, blaming the unvaccinated, blaming the citizens, blaming us for our so-called indiscipline. When did it become okay in the medical fraternity to victim blame? Why? So was it okay to blame people for getting AIDS, for getting cancer, for getting diabetes? Is that the process and the professionalism in the medical fraternity? Or is Keith Christopher Rowley warping everything that he touches?
Well, the whole health sector management has been a terrible disaster under the PNM for the last 6 years. And of course, it goes into other sectors as well. In fact, all the other ministries have been disastrous. So when you have general incompetence and widespread incompetence, and forgive me, I mean, when I analyze and look at the PNM bench across on the other side, what do I see? Who can assist Rowley in making decisions and bringing up right ideas and so on? I see nobody. You have two below average attorneys. You have one who doesn't know whether his master's in X or Y or so. And then what you have there, we have to focus on the health issue and how do we reduce these amount of deaths, get the best advice. A simple little thing. Why can't you get Industrial Gases Limited to come in to Coover Hospital and Eric Williams Medical Sciences and pipe oxygen along the walls so that the patients could get the oxygen from the walls? On the wards you have it, but if you have a tent, imagine in this day and age you have tent to take care of patients, run something along the wall, so you'd have to depend on oxygen cylinders running out, patients without oxygen and they're dying while waiting for oxygen. There are small oxygen concentrators that patients use now. They're larger ones. Oh God, get them. Why are you not getting the medication? Why are you not hiring more nurses? Why are you not bringing more senior doctors into the system? Why are you not bringing the personal protective equipment where doctors don't even have the size gloves to wear? What are you all doing? It's shameful, disrespectful to the population, and it's abysmal failure, and really widespread incompetence and criminal negligence on the part of Prime Minister Rowley, Minister Diyal Singh, and the entire management team and the regional health authority boards for not coming up to what is expected of them to be able to put this, dampen down these amount of deaths on a daily basis. So, and then Prime Minister Rowley said he's concerned, he's wondering why people are not concerned about these amount of deaths. People have become numb to it, Prime Minister. They hear 32 deaths, well, 32 deaths today, 31 yesterday, 33, and you know, the inner well-being of a citizen is destroyed.
It's
their
a
whole
coping
moral,
mechanism.
your whole persona is destroyed when you hear these amount of deaths on a daily basis. It's your friend, it's our family. And he himself admitted a number of his friends and families passed. But what has he done? Absolutely nothing. Mrs. Bisesa asked for a bipartisan approach on numerous occasions. You don't want it? Well, that's it. Your patients are dying under your eyes.
Thank you. And Tim Gopi Singh, when you say that, and I tell to keep Christopher Rowley, stop blaming the people. The citizens have done what you've said. They've listened, even though your path has changed and turned many corners as you played with science and you played with doctors who Kamala Prasad Bisesa said should have been fired. At 200 deaths, we now stand at 2,560 deaths. And I now understand why we're dying, because it's gross negligence, criminal negligence, and mismanagement, that we do not know what we're doing. The PNM does not know what it's doing. Rowley does not know what he's doing. Diyal Singh does not know what he's doing. Davlin Thomas does not know what he's doing. doing. Those junior doctors who are selling rum and on P&M boards do not know what they're doing, and the people are suffering. Keith Rowley, how dare you blame the people? Stop blaming the people. You are like a father who stays home and drink rum whole day and does not go to work, but you tell your wife and your 3 daughters they must go out, and you mandate that they go out to work. You are like a pimp daddy. Keith Rowley, get out of office. You must go. Our people are dying. They're fed up of you. Tobago is fed up of you, and Trinidad is ready to go yellow. So call the election and let competent doctors deal with our health, my family's health, my children's health, my people's health, my friends' health, because we're losing people daily. I can't even watch Facebook. RIP, RIP, RIP. I want to hear RIP PNM, RIP politically Rowley. Y'all must go. Thank you very much, Tim Gopi Singh, the United National Congress National Press Briefing. If there are any questions, we will take media. If or y'all have questions after I grill Tim Gopi Singh, I would love to hear the questions. Are there any? Yes. Archie, does he have a mic? Yeah. Right.
Good morning, Prior Bihari, AZP News here. Dr. Gopi Singh, I wanted to ask you what you think is the solution. You know, we cannot be trying to increase beds, to increase ICU capacity all the time. Something has to be done. So what do you think?
Thank you for asking that
solution?
question. Prior, appreciated. It's a multifactorial approach to it. In fact, the minister, if he wants to, he must change his boards of the regional health authorities immediately. He must change his CEO of the North Central Regional Health Authority. He must begin to ask for help from the senior experienced doctors rather than threatening them on a daily basis. He must seek to get what is required in terms of the personal protective equipment, the ventilators working properly, so all these things that go with it. He must immediately work with these pharmaceutical companies to get these drugs like remdesivir and tocilizumab and the other drugs that are required. He must work towards ensuring that the wider population, if he says it's a parallel health system, must be adequately controlled with their diabetes and hypertension. They must be able to rotate their junior doctors and keep on training. He has to employ more nurses into the system. He has to give them better contracts and terms of employment, and continue to educate the population and incentivize the population on taking the vaccines, not to be high-handed, authoritarian and dictatorial in terms of mandatory vaccination in the public service and so on. Let the people be incentivized. Go out and reach them. They may have little fears and apprehensions, which can be answered. And Prior, you know very well that many people would have been calling you, and we spoke many times. You know that when you talk to patients, they are convinced now that they need to take the vaccine. You don't have to be high-handed in your approach and dictatorial. Persuasion is important. And there are many others. I just mentioned the whole thing about oxygen concentrators, oxygen masks. Give the patients at home who are positive, manage them properly, speak to them, check them out, and make sure your ambulance service is working efficiently. Get more training for the emergency technicians. So it's about 100 different things that you can do over. I mean, I've given you just some of the answers to it. And of course, make testing cheaper for the population, bring in the quick antigen testing so that they can purchase it in the pharmacies and so on. And if they're positive, they have to report it, as is the law now. So, Prior, in a nutshell, I hope this answers your question to a certain extent.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Yeah, good morning. Good morning, Jules Brown, TV6 News. Just wondering, in terms of Dr. Gopi Singh, you had mentioned your assessment in terms of, and I'm taking it as from the Prime Minister's announcement that the public sector workers have to be vaccinated or face furloughs from mid-January. But I'm wondering, in terms of that position from the standpoint of industrial relations law and the Constitution, if any of you, yourself or Senator Roberts, could give an assessment in that regard from the opposition standpoint.
Yes, thank you, Joel. And the opposition's position has been made clear from early o'clock by the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, Kamla Persad-Bissessar. The opposition stands firmly against any form or fashion of forced mandatory vaccination. The opposition understands the law, and it has been stated by the industrial court that the collective bargaining arrangements that existed as law in our country cannot tolerate the illegal, illegitimate forcing of new conditions onto existing contracted employees. That is not on, and it is illegal. Keith Rowley is fast and out of place. He is attacking public servants, partly because Watson Duke was the head of the PSA who gave him a 14-to-1 shellacking. He cannot take his licks, and he must not be vindictive and punish public servants and public sector workers. Keep in mind that 49% of the police are not vaccinated. What is Keith Rowley going to tell us now that we are in our highest murders? The murder rate is the highest in our history. 77 murders in November. No police commissioner since August 11th onwards, and they just appointed one. We wish him all the best, but the murder rate, the crime rate is at a high. What is going to happen to the 51% of unvaccinated police workers? They have to stay home and take furlough so the bandits could come out and kill us, rob us, rape our daughters. Keith Rowley is clueless. He has no ideas, and he is forcing mandatory vaccination to overcompensate for his incompetence, stupidity, and, as Dr. Tim Gopi Singh has shown, criminal negligence. The United National Congress does not support any form or fashion of forced mandatory vaccination. We believe that vaccination is one tool to be used in the fight against the COVID-19 disease and the pandemic. Many others need to be improved, and all Tim Gopi Singh has said today needs to be impacted so that we stop losing citizens at a rate of 30 per day. Thank you very much.
One other question, sir. One other question quickly. The government had said yesterday, whatever laws that will be going to Parliament in January to effect this public sector safe zones initiative do not require a special majority. Has the opposition had a chance to look at that position in terms of whether...
Let me just state categorically, Joel, Keith Rowley is the worst prime minister in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. He has trampled the constitution with the most unintelligent attorney general to ever sit in that office. A man who not only by his education level does not come up to scratch, his drafting of laws and his trampling of the constitution. They have brought legislation previously which requires the constitutional majorities in order to have dialogue and consultation. Keith Rowley is a dictator and an oppressor. So he will do what he wants to do to come with a simple majority to mandate, to oppress, and to dictate to the human beings. But the population has made them out. They may bully us in Parliament because they have the majority and they do not let us speak, and there is nothing constitutionally that we can do at that point unless our lawyers will look at it and go to the courts as is a custom. However, the people will speak as they spoke in Tobago. The people power. People are fed up of Keith Rowley. People are fed up of his oppressive, tyrannical charade. People are fed up of the premeditated, state-sanctioned murder that is taking place at our hospitals across Trinidad and Tobago. So yes, they will come with their Duncy Attorney General to come without a special majority. There is nothing special about the PNM. They do not even have a legitimate majority now, because as it stands in Trinidad and Tobago, the seat allocation based on the latest results from Tobago is the UNC 24, the PNM 15, and the PDP 2. So Rowley has no mandate, no authority from the people to do such a thing. But that won't stop a tyrannical dictator. But Kamla Persad-Bissessar and the UNC will fight him every step of the way to fight to save our democracy. Thank you very much, Dr. Tim Gopi Singh. I feel like I have gotten a little bit more intelligent in the last hour and 14 minutes. You are brilliant. You're a specialist. To you and your other specialist doctors, I pray that during this Christmas period that Keith Rowley will get a spirit to go, to get the vibe to leave us in peace as a country, to survive and put intelligent people like you in charge of our health. I would feel more secure with my 3 children living here in Trinidad and Tobago with you and other doctors in the United National Congress who understand the importance of saving lives, who understand medicine, medical care, medical treatment, and what is necessary to keep our people safe. I will feel safer and more comfortable with people like you in charge. The United National Congress says thank you from me and from Dr. Tim Gopi Singh. Merry Christmas if we don't see you before then. Be safe, keep your money tight, save, and take care of those loved ones. God bless you. To all those who have lost people, we say we empathize and our deepest condolences to each and every one of you. Tim?
Yeah, may I make a last appeal for all unvaccinated citizens? There is absolutely really no contraindication to not taking the vaccine. In fact, if you are critically ill with a heart disease or immunocompromised, very rare situations will prevent you from accepting the vaccine. The vaccine will save your life, it will save your family's lives. Please go out and get the vaccines. Do not wait until you are in the ICU and you're bidding farewell to the rest of your family on a deathbed. The complication rate from the vaccines is very, very infinitesimally small. And we have just had 1 or 2 cases of reporting of complications from the vaccine. It's safe, it's effective, it prevents you from being seriously ill and dying. And it also prevents the younger ones from having long-term complications of COVID if you get COVID and you may survive. So please go out and get your vaccines. Please bring this to an end so that the
Thank you,
suffering is
Dr.
at an
Gopi
end.
Singh, and that's what the UNC has been doing, vaccination through education. Vaccination is one tool to be implemented in the war against the pandemic. Kamala Persad-Bissessar would have locked down a security dome across this country to prevent the Brazilian variant and the Delta variants from coming. She would have input people like Tim Gopi Singh and other doctors to head the medical fight. The specialists would have been in charge. The people would have been given testing for free. They would have been contact tracing across the board. Citizens would never have been kept out of the country. The rates of assistance from the government for those who have lost work and were unable to pay to work if there was a lockdown would have been upwards of 3,000 per month and would not have involved such forms to fill out to turn people off. The doctors would have been on track. The testing would have been available. The contact tracing, the oxygen consumption, the ventilation. There would have been more ICU beds under Kamala Persad-Bissessar. Nurses would have been getting bonuses. Doctors would have been rotating. All the 400 doctors that are out there would have been put back in. The UNC would have held a stranglehold on COVID-19 and kept our country safe as a pristine paradise for the world to envy. Unfortunately, we have the PNM that has overseen a premeditated situation, a premeditated state-sanctioned murder. And for this criminal negligence, Keith Rowley and the entire PNM must be held accountable. Tim Gopi Singh, Kamala Persad-Bissessar and the UNC call for a commission of inquiry into each and every one of the so far 2,560 deaths that could have been avoided with better management, better skill, better care, and more brain. The PNM must go, and so we must go right now to be back next week. Merry Christmas. God bless.